With over 600 educational sessions on more than 50 topics, it's the most important place to be for psychiatrists from all around the world. We're at the 2023 annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association, and this is APA TV. Welcome back to the Moscone for one last day of APA TV. We hope you've made the most of the Bay Area and have made sure to get hold of all the knowledge you need to help improve the lives of all your patients. Today we're taking a closer look at addiction in all its formats. On the show today, we look at how to tailor addiction treatment for marginalized communities, investigate the mental health impact of social media and technology, and look out for an interview with incoming President Dr. Petros Levounis. Plus, in the APA TV film series today, we look at some of the world's leading addiction services and so much more besides. And remember, you can watch APA TV on screens at the Moscone, in select hotels, on the APA website, via the app, and of course on the virtual platform. And you can find, share, subscribe and like on social media. Soon we discuss a growing cause for concern, food addiction. But first over to Dr. Eric Williams for the last time to find out what's happening today at the APA.
Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Williams, chair of this meeting's Scientific Program Committee, and welcome to the last day of this year's annual meeting. There is so much more learning to be done. We have scientific sessions today on everything from interventional psychiatry to navigating psychiatric residency to becoming an advocate. Make sure you get your general meeting evaluation and CME certificates at the CME credit booth in South Lobby by 5:15 today. I hope you enjoyed your time here in San Francisco. Safe travels home, and I look forward to seeing you next May in New York for our 2024 annual meeting.
As our understanding of the impact food can have on the brain has changed, it's becoming more apparent that food can trigger the same neural effects as seen in addiction. To discuss this, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Dr. Ashley Gearhardt. Dr. Gearhardt, welcome.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Let's kick off. What is food addiction?
So what we think of when we say food addiction is that we hypothesize that really highly processed, rewarding foods can trigger all the key indicators of an addictive substance use disorder, like we see with alcohol and nicotine. And so how we conceptualize this is we apply the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for substance use disorders to the intake of foods like chocolate and ice cream and potato chips. And we see that about 14% of adults and 12% of children would qualify for a substance use disorder if the substance you were looking at was highly processed food.
What effect does this have on people who are addicted to these foodstuffs?
Yeah, what we see for people who seem to show those addiction profiles is that it really does feel like their relationship with food is very toxic for them, and that it's compulsive. And even if they want to stop or they're having health conditions that suggest they really need to change their diet, they find that they can't. And our research finds that this addictive profile predicts a worse treatment response to our traditional approaches to trying to help people lose weight or eat healthier, and that people who meet for this addictive profile with their highly processed food intake have a lower quality of life across every single domain. So this is really a group of people who are clinically suffering that right now, because this isn't a diagnostic category in our manual, we're kind of missing the assessment and identification of these people.
I imagine a lot of these conditions feed into each other, don't they, as well? Because obesity and a lot of different other conditions.
Absolutely, you're right. So we see that if we look at someone who is maybe has a body mass index in the normal weight range, it's about 7% of people would meet for this food addiction profile. If we look at individuals with obesity, it goes up to about 1 in 3. And when we look at the association with something like, let's say, type 2 diabetes, it is incredibly highly linked and at sometimes 6-fold as high risk of type 2 diabetes for people with this addiction profile. And we also see that there's a lot of high-risk substance use that can also co-occur. So just like we see with things like gambling, or people can who are at risk for drinking might also be at risk for smoking or using cannabis in a risky way. we see that there also might be this clustering of risky, highly processed food intake for people who are showing addictions in other realms.
What's the role for a psychiatrist here?
Yes, so a role for a psychiatrist, I think in large part, the psychiatric community plays such an important part in helping us conceptualize and identify clinically significant conditions. And I think the science has been emerging to a point where we really need to ask ourselves whether there's time to, at least in a provisional way, start to codify and investigate and diagnose this to help improve the science and improve treatment. I just think psychiatry has a lot to say and to bear on different addiction-focused treatments, whether that's pharmacology or psychobiological treatments that we have developed in the realm of addictive disorders, like naltrexone, like bupropion, that might really also be applicable to this large group of individuals who are currently really struggling to change their relationship with food.
Does this also lead to greater health inequity?
Yes, so we see that our modern food supply is wildly unequal, and that for communities of color, for people who are under-resourced, that it's not just that they live in food deserts where they can't access healthy food, but they live in food swamps where they're aggressively targeted to and marketed for these highly processed foods. And it's on every corner, and the queues and the drive-thrus and the bodegas are really just drenched in these foods. And we see this really starts even in childhood, that, people who have food insecurity and don't have enough money in their families to eat food every month in a sustainable way, that is associated with an increased risk of developing this addictive eating profile. Because you're really reliant on something that might be addictive to just get your daily needs met. Nobody gets to opt out of eating. And so when the environment is so incredibly imbalanced and structurally unfair, we do see that this has really important social justice implications.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now let's take a look at the Recovery Management Checkup, a new system being used to help people with opioid disorder when leaving jail.
What's going on, fellas? How y'all feel? What's going on? Who are you? I'm Gerald. I'm with Lighthouse Chestnut. How you doing? And one of the things that we offer is that we offer people wanting to get linking services too.
Opioid and other substance use disorders are consistently recognized as a brain disorder characterized by the loss of control, craving, continued use in spite of both physical, mental, and social problems. Long-term use is typically associated with increased involvement in the child welfare and justice systems. And in fact, during the course of the year, 1 in 4 people with opioid use disorder go through the justice system.
We took the chronic care model and applied it to developing recovery management checkups, that it would be an intervention that would be based on a long-term sustained contact to monitor and intervene when needed with people who have substance use disorders over time. And we have found that to be very successful in our prior studies. And in the current study, we're adapting it specifically for people with opioid use disorders who are leaving jail.
Individuals from marginalized communities are less likely to access treatment for addiction, but are frequently much more at risk. To understand why this is and how we can prevent it, we caught up with Sebastian Acevedo.
The data on racial, ethnic, and sexual minorities is actually quite nuanced. What we know based on the data is that if we have, for example, a white identified individual, after controlling for many various factors such as income, educational attainment, and neighborhood, we find that about 1 in 4 white identified individuals are able to seek good health care for a substance use disorder. Unfortunately, when we look at Black and or Latino identified individuals, that number can be as low as 17%, for example. So there's a lot of upstream social determinants that impact an individual's ability to actually seek culturally competent health care. So we know that based on just the literature, that substance use disorders don't happen in a vacuum. they co-occur quite frequently with mental health disorders. And the reasons for this is that oftentimes individuals who aren't able to seek health care for their mental illness actually seek substances as a way to cope with some of these mechanisms, right? So when we think about substance use disorders and prevalence rates, it really does go hand in hand with mental health. Someone has an opioid use disorder, we really do need to connect them to social services, housing, and other resources to make sure that the individual at their core is able to deal with a lot of these stressors that are sometimes out of our control as healthcare professionals. I'm currently based out of Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School, which is in Newark. It's a actually majority Black community with also a big proportion of Portuguese and Hispanic immigrants. So one of the things that we're doing in my school is that we have a low threshold buprenorphine clinic called the Care Center. It's actually a state-funded initiative through which we're actually ensuring that individuals with very complex co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders who have an opioid use disorder are able to seek treatment in our clinic. And so what we see in this clinic is that individuals who come in not only get the care that they need with medication, but they're also able to see counselors, we have social workers, we have referrals, and in the state there's been other pilots that have also increased access to treatment. For example, we've done mobile methadone vans in the state of New Jersey, and this is again another example of how we're going to the community to make sure that we're treating some of these disorders. In the literature, there's been some great examples, specifically in the Southwest, of individuals who treat substance use disorders actually teaming up with clergy members, for example, right? They get involved with clergy members and they train them on how to actually do referrals to substance use disorders. That's somewhere where I potentially want to pilot a program in the Northeast. But there's a lot of great work. I always say that the literature is very rich with data and interventions. We just have to find a way to make it sustainable and make it ongoing, and more importantly, bring it at a national level, which is why APA is a perfect place to talk about some of these initiatives.
Next, over to Singapore's Institute of Mental Health, where they offer a comprehensive range of psychiatric, rehabilitative and counselling services alongside the National Addictions Management Service.
Welcome to the Institute of Mental Health. M.P.H is the tertiary psychiatric hospital in Singapore. Nestled in the greenery of one of the densest suburbs northeast of the city, we're part of the National Healthcare Group. Aside from treating those with illness, our role in improving the mental health of our nation is equally important. The River of Life illustrates the scope of our work, from preventive strategies upstream to tertiary intervention downstream. The River of Life incorporates the physical, mental, and social dimensions of health, from cradle to grave. In order to serve our patients, meet the needs of the people of Singapore, and develop our staff, we have developed 3 master plans to guide our long-term strategic planning. These are the Clinical Master Plan, the Campus Master Plan, and the Human Capital Master Plan.
You don't need me to tell you, social media has had a major influence on our lives. Even as the fortunes of different platforms may ebb and flow, the way we communicate and present ourselves to the world has fundamentally changed. To talk about the impact of this on mental health, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Pratik Bahika and Dr. Amir Ahuja. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Now, social media, I mean, who can escape social media, and especially here in San Francisco, right? So from a psychological perspective, what are some of the pluses and what are some of the minuses when it comes to social media?
Yeah, I think that, some pluses are that especially we see in certain discriminated communities that access to information is really key. And for all people, mental health services sometimes are stigmatized and sometimes are hard to find in your area. So we think that connecting with other people and connecting with resources is one of the best parts of social media. And especially if they are far apart or there's a lack of resources in your area. I think the negatives can be that there's lack of in-person connection and you kind of have a false sense of connection that isn't really, scratch the itch of what we really need as humans to be connected to each other.
Yeah, I think social media allows us to have conversation, but it's not face-to-face. What studies have shown that when you have in-person conversation, about 30 to 40% is about oneself. but rest of it is about a dialogue. When you talk about, social media, it's almost about 80%, like twice as much is about me, and what I think is right. So it kind of deprives us from having an opportunity to have a conversation, dialogue, and be open to other sorts of point of view. And you obviously think that is psychologically how it impacts us. Like, we are not agreeing to other point, it's like, oh, I don't want to talk to this person, and then you become isolated. Once you become isolated, it's more depression sets in, lack of self-esteem, anxiety, right? But there are pluses, like Dr. Ahuja said too.
Is there also an issue with addiction in social media? Do people get addicted to social media?
That is true, because like I said, once you get a like, it's like, oh, I got a like, and that's like an instant reward. It's like, but then sometimes you don't get. So what is happening now is something called as intermittent reward system, which is conditions our brain to get addicted to something, and which is kind of a worst part of addiction that you can develop, because there is a regular reward system and there is irregular reward system. So that hooks you in. So every time you get notification, you want to look at it, and then you kind of want to look at it multiple times during the day. You're doing something and you want to open the phone, and there it is, bing. So that itself has negative consequences too.
Yeah, I think a lot of the research suggests that the use of social media with certain people does bear the hallmarks of addiction that we think of. And I think clinicians can think of this as maybe not necessarily diagnosing it as internet addiction, but looking for warning signs, such as, you're increasing your use, you're missing school or work because of use, the hostility or anger is increasing when you use it, you need more extreme content to get the same effect. I mean, all that stuff applies in this case.
So what's the role for the psychiatrist in all this?
First of all, psychiatrists needs to keep up to date about what social media platforms are, what they are, what they are trying to do and how they are working. At the same time, psychiatrists needs to talk to their patients, ask their patient what kind of social media they are using, what are their experiences, whether they are being stalked or whether they are being bullied. And this is especially important in teenage years or adolescent.
Yeah, I think asking about use and also not assuming what language people are using or where they are, and being open to being taught by your patients about where they are. I think that definitely helps on an individual level, but I think on a societal level, I think we can elevate the fact that there are good aspects and there are bad aspects, and try to educate really companies in order to make sure that they, sort of go on the side of the positive and limit the negative impact.
It's a really interesting point that you make on a societal level, and in a way, social media appears to people like it's a juggernaut. I mean, this is a huge operation heading in kind of one direction. What do we need to do as a society then to try and mitigate the more negative effects of social media?
I mean, well, I think that as social media is becoming more of the public square that we've had in other eras in a different, not online, I think we have to be able to moderate it and be able to have boundaries and sort of when we need to be able to monitor more of what people are saying. So I think that could be some restrictions that are reasonable. Obviously, you also have to balance free speech and censorship, but I think that could be something.
Society needs to be vigilant about what's happening and demand social media company to be more responsible. They have already set up a rule, but they need to do a better job at enforcing them.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's a fascinating subject, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go now to the University of Rochester Medical Center, birthplace of the biopsychosocial model.
It begins with our foundational belief that there is no health without mental health. We also believe the opposite as well. There is no mental health without physical health.
The Division of Collaborative Care and Wellness here in the Department of Psychiatry was founded with the specific aim to support the design and implementation of programs and services that are at the interface between psychiatry and general medicine. The biopsychosocial model emphasizes the importance of the psychological and social importance in the care of the patients.
I think the future of the program and of healthcare is innovation. We need to keep pushing the boundaries so that we can be able to meet our goals of delivering or improving the care of people with severe mental illness.
First of all, welcome and thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks so much for having me here.
Now listen, we're a couple of days away from you becoming APA president. How exciting is that?
It is quite exciting. It's on Wednesday at 4 p.m. So that's going to officially take over. It's an incredible honor to be president of the APA. For a lifelong psychiatrist is something that we've been looking up to. And our biggest fear is to have this whole year not be as meaningful as it can possibly be. The opportunity is tremendous, so I hope that I'm able to contribute something to it.
And I'm sure you will. But you've talked about capitalizing on this moment where there's so much focus on mental health. How do you intend to do that?
For the longest time, we've been screaming from the rooftops about the importance of mental health. And all of a sudden, not exactly all of a sudden, but certainly with the pandemic, it seems that the tables have turned. And instead of us trying to tell society that mental health is important, society is telling us, we got it. We know how important it is. Please help us. So the ball is clearly on our court to deliver on this societal mandate in terms of services, in terms of education, in terms of direction, in terms of policies, all the things that the APA has been doing for many, many years. Only we need to up the volume on all this tremendously to respond to this incredible mandate the society has given us.
And it seems to me that the challenges that society throws up to get greater and greater. So now we've got people who are worried and concerned about climate change, about the role of technology. So how do you equip your workforce, the psychiatrists, to deal with these mega issues?
The issue here is that these mega issues do have significant mental health implications. So we cannot shy away from them. We absolutely need to engage in these debates and offer what psychiatrists do best, the expertise on mental health in addressing these particular issues. So I don't think we should be putting them aside. I think we should focus on the mental health implications of these larger issues and work with our partners to improve people's health. When it comes to technology, it happens that the part of my scholarship is on the technological addictions. Internet gaming, cybersex, social media, texting and emailing, and so on. So I do plan to engage in a conversation about technology and technological addictions more specifically.
Final question, unfair question.
Okay.
How do you see the future of psychiatry?
I do see us shifting from primarily delivering direct services to delivering, of course, direct service, but also spending a considerable time of our professional work in consultation. The need for mental health is tremendous. We're doing everything we can to increase the number of residency slots so that we can get more psychiatrists in the future. But no matter what we do, there's no way that we're going to be able to satisfy the incredible need that we see out there. So we need to collaborate with our partners in other fields of medicine, with our partners in other professions in mental health, and assume a consultative role in directing healthcare, as well as, of course, delivering direct services.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and I'm sure your presidency will be a great success. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Nick. Take care.
It's our last feature from our film series now. Make sure to catch them all throughout by heading online. So let's go to the Institute of Living at Hartford Hospital.
The Institute of Living is a place that was founded 200 years ago around the simple idea that we should be centering the dignity and humanity of the sufferer. Our vision is something we're calling radical recovery. the idea that we can move forward to reimagine mental health care in a way that's far less coercive, much more community-centered.
In a lot of the range of services that we have here, we've really worked on developing specializations so that we meet the needs of the population to the best of our ability.
What we're doing is using biological measurements to classify psychiatric illnesses.
We're not afraid of being bold and really reshaping the way we do things, knowing that this should have happened a long time ago.
Can you believe it? It's almost over. And as we come to the end of another annual meeting, we made sure to ask you one last time what your highlights have been in San Francisco.
The highlight of AP always for me is the camaraderie, meeting people, and also learning new things. So there was a huge focus on psychedelics, and I think that's the future of psychiatry and a new frontier for us. There's a lot of excitement, skepticism, a lot of questions about how things are going to come out. So it was a very good combination of information.
The ever-evolving field of psychiatry is quite, it's impressive. We need to kind of come to this session to see, to listen to world-renowned speakers, hear their research, know what the recent trends are in some of these mental health illnesses, and kind of like incorporate that in our practices going back.
It's hard not to find something that's interesting here. I just came out of a serious mental illness and pregnancy lecture. It was absolutely great. This is my first APA conference, so I'm thrilled to be here. It feels like a homecoming in a way, so I'm glad to be part of it all.
I went to one yesterday on psychodynamic psychopharmacology. That was wonderful. I learned so much. I went to one on monoamine oxidase inhibitors, fantastic. But I feel like I've had a wide variety of things that I've learned and had a great time.
It's always good to understand what is going on, what are new things coming up in the field, share mind on research findings, poster presentation and all that. I think it's really interesting. So I like to come here to share ideas with great minds from all over the country.
San Francisco is fun. This is my first time in San Francisco, actually. So I went to the Golden Gate Bridge at some point. I had some souvenirs to go with, so I'm going to give my kids when I get back home. I'm looking forward to New York next year, and it's going to be exciting. Just all the full experience of the APA, I think it's kind of like the mecca of psychiatry, and I'm kind of like, moving forward for the next couple of years, hoping to come once a year at least.
That's it. Another weekend of insights into the wide and exciting world of psychiatry. We've looked at artificial intelligence, psychedelics, nutrition, and so much more. Remember, you can watch APA TV on screens at the Moscone, in select hotels, on the APA website, via the app, and of course on the virtual platform. And you can find, share, subscribe and like on social media. Make sure to catch anything you've missed as you head home from the meeting online. It'll all be there waiting for you. You can find extended versions of all our content coming soon, including on podcast format. So make sure to follow and subscribe. We'll see you next year as we head back to the Big Apple. I'm Stephen Horn. It's been great, and we'll see you next year. Bye-bye.